Hi, my name is Raymond Turner, and I'm the recording studio producer at Cook Children's. And many people, they kind of give me a sideways look whenever I say I'm the recording studio producer at a children's hospital, which is a very unique role. And that involves a lot of what you might think it does, from recording and producing and moving faders and pushing buttons. But it also really gets down into the nitty-gritty of lives of children who end up at the hospital. And we get to really help them uncover their journey and really dig through some of the issues beyond just the physical things that brought them to the hospital, but even some of the emotional elements that they've gone through because of some of the physical things they've had to endure. So yes, the songwriting process, but it also involves helping kids kind of learn new instruments. We have a whole plethora of instruments, some of them that they've never seen before, and they get to explore these things and try them out, many of them for the first time. Or some of them who may be in a band or in band in high school, they end up here in the hospital. And while they're in the hospital, they actually get to come down and practice or play an instrument that they play in band. They kind of keep that going while they're in there. So it really is a unique role and a unique situation that you won't find anywhere else. So Sparklefly Studio is the name of the studio at Cook Children's. And I named the studio after being there for probably about a year and a half. I didn't just want to give it an arbitrary name. So around that time, I kept envisioning fireflies. And the way that came about was during recording sessions, patients, we would talk about different things that they were going through. And some of them were going through some incredible challenges at home. And not only just the physical things that brought them to the hospital, but things that they were still dealing with. Some of them dealing with bullying. Some of them dealing with being made fun of because of some of the medical devices they had to wear at school. But when they were in the studio, it's like they just lit up the place. And we were able to get beyond the things that they were going through during the songwriting process. And I left feeling encouraged, like, man, these kids are my heroes. And so as I started thinking about them and envisioning fireflies, and how fireflies, they're such an anomaly, because I always tell people, fireflies, they're not plugged in, but yet their luminance or their light is really only seen against the backdrop of twilight or night. And so in the same way, a lot of these patients, when they come in and we're dealing with really tough subjects and songs that sometimes take months to unearth things that they've gone through, but when that's done, to see what they've created not only light up their lives, but also other staff members, their friends, their family, they get to see what they've created light up other people's lives. But again, often what they've created is against the backdrop of an incredibly dark environment that they've not only come out of, but still dealing with during the songwriting process. So hence the name Sparklefly. Is kind of a whimsical play on the concept of a firefly. And I thought it was very appropriate for what we do. So a couple of my most meaningful projects, if I may give a couple of examples, there is one in particular. There's a song on the We Rise project. And we started writing this project through a songwriting camp. And there was one of the patients who came in and she wanted to write a song. Her dad wanted her to write something upbeat. And she literally came in a wheelchair and sat down right behind the recording booth. And she said, okay, I'm ready. And I wasn't ready. I still had to fire up the board and get everything, primed, which as a recording studio producer or musician, you understand getting that ready. And by the time I got everything set, she had written the lyrics and I gave a few basic chord progressions to get things going and started to produce the song. But before she left, I said, hey, how do you want it to feel? What kind of instrumentation do you want it to have? And we talked about it and she left. And over the course of the next several months, I was working through the song arrangement and I had a few other patients actually come in and get involved in the process. And we were getting ready for the CD release. And I was working on the song one day, hadn't worked on it in a couple of weeks or a couple of months. And right as I started working on it, I got a call from upstairs and they said that she was in the hospital. And I said, oh, I'd love for her to hear the progress of the song. And they said, well, she just passed away. And so it was one of those moments where the realization hit me that the work that we do really is kind of bridges this chasm between literally life and death. And some of the things that we do in moments of levity often become legacy projects, unbeknownst to us for some of these patients. And it ended up being the very last thing that she recorded and left to encourage other people. And along those lines, talking about legacy projects, the heartbeat recordings are, I would consider to be the pinnacle of the work that I get to do there. And that involves, capturing the heartbeats of terminal babies and young children, even some teenagers who've been treated at the hospital most of their lives. And so we'll talk with them or the family about a song that's meaningful to them. And our music therapist will capture the heartbeat recording, and then it's literally a production meeting where we recreate that song from the ground up with specific instrumentation. But the child's heartbeat becomes the tempo. And sometimes that involves reworking the song almost as if it were a new song, because the heartbeat may be really slow or in some cases very fast. But we recreate that for the family, and to be able to give that back to the family. Usually the child doesn't have the opportunity to hear that. I can only think of maybe 2 cases where the child has actually had the opportunity to come back in and hear the song. But for us, that's something incredibly meaningful to be able to give back to these families. Many of them who came into the hospital with a child find themselves leaving without their child. And to be able to have that still living part of them, along with something so meaningful to give back, truly is something very special that I feel honored to be a part of. I love what I do because I feel like it's more of a calling than a job. And I remember when I started working at Cook Children's, one of the first things I told people was I felt like I had stepped into what I was created to do. And along those lines, and working with patients and working with the heartbeat recordings, it was pretty difficult at first. I remember the first few months I would be driving home and I would be angry with people on the highway, thinking, somebody cut me off, and I'm thinking, do you know what I just came out of, And I had to, I'd go home and I would hug my kids tighter at night. And every day was a recalibrating just scenario for me, coming in and realizing that there are parents, there are families, there are children dealing with insurmountable issues and fighting for their lives. And so in working with the heartbeat recordings, even, I feel like there's a grace gift, or like a moment of suspension where I'm able to do the work. And then afterwards, I have this kind of ritual that I do, this actual kind of walk that I do around the hospital, a specific path that ends up in one of the garden areas. And I sit there for a moment and just allow myself to take in what just happened. And also a moment of respect for the patient and their family before I go back into maybe another activity or another session or a fun activity. It's just that moment that I have. And so I often tell people I have the best job at the hospital. And but it really is, it's not a job. When I wake up still, even after doing it all this time, I can't believe that I get to do what I get to do in the way that I get to serve these patients and families. And so I'm extremely honored and grateful to get to do what I do.